February 28, 2026, early morning. Most people around the world were busy with their normal routines. Some were heading to work, others to school, and many were simply scrolling through the news on their phones with a cup of coffee. But at that exact moment, something was about to happen in the skies over the Middle East that would capture the attention of the entire world. In several cities across Iran, sirens suddenly began to sound. People were confused. What was happening? An earthquake? FOF? Or just a military drill? Then, only seconds later, fighter jets appeared in the sky, and immediately after that, boom! A massive explosion. Then another. Then a third. Within minutes, powerful blasts began echoing across multiple cities in Iran. This was not a routine airstrike. This was a coordinated military operation by the United States and Israel. The operation had two names, Epic Fury and Roaring Lion. So what were the targets? Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran's missile bases, Iran's military command centers, and the most shocking target of all, Iran's top leadership. Within hours, a piece of news shocked the entire world. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had reportedly been killed in a targeted strike. If you follow Middle East politics even a little, you understand this was a massive moment. It was essentially a message. The game had completely changed. But the real question is, did this war suddenly begin? Or had this story been quietly unfolding for years? The truth is, the roots of this conflict go back much further. Let's go back in time for a moment. The year 2015. Iran and several of the world's major powers signed a nuclear agreement. It was called JCPOA. In simple terms, the agreement meant this: Iran would limit its nuclear program, and in return, the economic sanctions placed on the country would be reduced. For a few years, the system actually worked. But then, in 2018, the United States withdrew from the deal. Soon after that, heavy sanctions were imposed on Iran. Iran's economy came under intense pressure. But Iran also responded. They increased uranium enrichment and accelerated the development of their missile and drone programs. Israel watched these developments with growing concern. They began to believe that Iran was moving dangerously close to developing a nuclear weapon. And then, another event occurred that destabilized the entire region. October 7, 2023, Hamas launched a large-scale attack on Israel, and the Gaza war began. After that, tensions across the Middle East started escalating like a chain reaction. Iran-backed groups such as Hezbollah began clashing with Israel more frequently. Then, in 2024, a historic moment occurred. For the first time in history, Iran and Israel launched missiles and drones directly at each other. Previously, both countries usually relied on proxy groups. But now, the confrontation had become direct. Then the situation escalated even further. In June 2025, Israel carried out major airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites, Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. A few days later, the United States also joined the operation. Iran responded by launching hundreds of missiles toward Israel and American military bases. For 12 days, intense fighting continued. The conflict later became known as the 12-Day War. On June 24, 2025, a ceasefire was announced. But in reality, this was not lasting peace. It was simply a pause. Tensions still remained. By the end of 2025, the situation inside Iran had become even more unstable. Due to economic crisis, international sanctions, and political anger, mass protests erupted across the country. Thousands of people took to the streets. The government responded with strict crackdowns. International pressure increased even further. Meanwhile, nuclear negotiations between the United States and Iran resumed. Talks were being held in Oman and Geneva. The world hoped that perhaps a diplomatic solution could still emerge. But then, February 2026, the negotiations completely collapsed. No agreement was reached. And just 2 days later, on the morning of February 28, 2026, the skies over the Middle East were suddenly filled with fighter jets. Hundreds of aircraft, cruise missiles, long-range strike weapons were heading towards several cities in Iran: Tehran, Tabriz, Isfahan, Qom. Within just a few hours, hundreds of targets had been struck. Nuclear facilities, missile launch sites, air defense radars, Everything was being systematically destroyed. The objective of the United States and Israel was clear: to severely weaken Iran's military capabilities. But the biggest shock came afterward, when it was confirmed that Iran's top leadership had been eliminated. Supreme Leader Khamenei and several senior commanders had been killed in the attack. Now the world was asking only one question: what will Iran do next? Because history shows Iran rarely remains silent after an attack. And that is exactly what happened. Iran announced its counter-operation, True Promise IV. What happened next became one of the largest missile attacks in the history of the Middle East. Iran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones, and the target was not only Israel. Missiles were heading toward American military bases and Gulf countries: Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Kuwait, Bahrain. Reports of explosions began emerging from multiple cities. Air defense systems worked continuously to intercept the incoming missiles. Many were destroyed in the air, but some drones and missiles managed to break through the defenses and reach major cities. Several buildings caught fire. Airports were temporarily shut down. Flights began to be canceled, and now it had become clear this was no longer just a war between Iran and Israel. This had turned into a conflict affecting the entire region. But the story does not end here, because within the next few hours, Iran was about to take a step that could shake not only the Middle East, but the entire global economy. And the name of that decision was the Strait of Hormuz. And when Iran warned that it might block the strait, the world suddenly realized this war was no longer just a military confrontation. It could become a global crisis. In part 2, the story becomes even more dangerous.